Good morning. Every single one of us is trying to figure life out, how to be more fulfilled, more productive, more aligned with our purpose. But what if the answer doesn't lie in adding more things to your life? More books, more habits, more hacks, but rather in taking control of just four things. Let me say this clearly: master these four areas and your life will shift instantly. Not gradually, but profoundly. The first is your thoughts. We live most of our life inside our own heads, and yet we rarely audit the quality of what goes on in there. Your internal narrative, the way you speak to yourself when no one's listening, shapes the way you behave, the way you react, and even the opportunities you recognize. If you tell yourself you're not good enough, your mind will search for evidence to prove it. But if you consciously feed it with thoughts of growth, curiosity, and possibility, you'll begin to build a mindset that attracts clarity and confidence. Remember this: you can't control every thought, but you can control what you dwell on. The second is your words. Language isn't just a method of communication, it's a tool of influence. The way you speak to others can either build trust or destroy it. The way you speak about your life, even casually, programs your brain. Stop saying, "I'm always tired," or "I never have time," or "I'm bad at this." Start saying, "I'm working on improving," or "I'm prioritizing what matters," or "I'm learning." The shift may feel small, but the impact is massive. Words are not harmless, they are seeds. They grow into your habits, your mindset, your reality. The third is your habits. Most people don't decide their future. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their future. It's not the big, dramatic moments that shape your destiny. It's the daily systems you repeat when no one is watching. Every morning you wake up and hit snooze, you're voting for delay. Every morning you wake up and take action, even something small, you're voting for momentum. Your life isn't transformed in a day, but it can begin in a moment. The moment you take control of your routine. And finally, the fourth is your circle. The people around you either fuel your growth or drain your energy. If you surround yourself with complainers, you will find something to complain about. If you surround yourself with builders, you will be inspired to build. Audit your circle. Are they pushing you forward or holding you in place? Are they reflecting your old self or calling out your potential? Sometimes transforming your life requires difficult conversations. Sometimes it requires distance. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to the level of your environment. So upgrade it. These four things: your thoughts, your words, your habits, and your circle, are under your control. And when you take responsibility for them, everything changes. Not eventually, not someday, instantly. Because transformation isn't something that happens in the future. It's something that begins the moment you decide, "I'm done outsourcing control. I'm ready to lead myself." 5 keynotes of the speech: your thoughts shape your mindset and reality. Control what you focus on, and you control your experience. Your words influence not only others, but yourself. Shift your language to shift your identity. Your habits are the building blocks of your future. Change them and you change your trajectory. Your circle impacts your energy and growth. Align with people who reflect your vision, not your comfort zone. Transformation begins the moment you stop waiting and start taking responsibility for what you can control. Your thoughts are the foundation of everything you do, everything you feel, and everything you become. They're invisible, silent, and often go unnoticed, but they are constantly shaping your decisions, your relationships, your actions, and ultimately your reality. Most people don't realize how much power lies in what goes on inside their minds. They assume life happens to them without realizing how often it is happening through them, filtered and interpreted by their own thought patterns. When you begin to take control of your thoughts, you're not just changing what you think, you're changing how you live. Every single day, your brain is processing thousands of thoughts. Some are intentional, many are automatic. These automatic thoughts come from years of conditioning, your upbringing, your environment, your past experiences, and the voices you've listened to. Over time, those voices turn into your own internal dialogue, and that dialogue becomes the lens through which you see the world. If that lens is covered in self-doubt, fear, and negativity, then even the best opportunities will look like threats. But if that lens is shaped by possibility, resilience, and self-belief, even setbacks will appear as stepping stones. The difference between a person who thrives and a person who struggles isn't always about talent or circumstances. Often, it comes down to how they think. 2 people can go through the exact same situation, say a job loss or a failed relationship, and have 2 completely different outcomes. One person spirals into despair and believes they're worthless. The other sees it as a wake-up call to reinvent themselves and grow. The situation didn't create the result, the thoughts did. This is why awareness is the first step to change. You cannot change what you don't recognize. You have to slow down and start paying attention to the patterns in your thinking. What do you say to yourself when you make a mistake? Do you say, "I'm such a failure"? Or do you say, "I'm learning, this is part of the process"? What do you tell yourself when facing uncertainty? Do you think, "This will never work"? Or do you say, "I've handled tough things before and I can figure this out too"? You don't need to fake positivity. This is not about pretending everything is fine when it isn't. It's about training your mind to respond differently, to be constructive, not destructive, to guide you forward instead of holding you back. A negative thought repeated enough times becomes a belief, and a belief shapes your behavior. That's why the thoughts you allow to live in your mind are not harmless. They're creating your future. Neuroscience backs this up. Your brain has a quality called neuroplasticity, which means it can literally be rewired by repeated thought patterns. The more you think a certain way, the stronger those neural pathways become. If you constantly think you're not good enough, your brain reinforces that pattern. But if you consciously challenge that thought and replace it with something empowering, over time your brain starts to adapt. That's not motivation talk. That's biology. It takes effort to think differently. It's easier to let your thoughts run wild. But if you want to live with intention, you have to think with intention. You have to create space in your day to question your thoughts. Not every thought deserves your belief. Not every fear is real. Not every assumption is truth. But unless you pause to examine them, your brain will treat them all as facts. That's how self-doubt grows. That's how fear spreads. That's how regret is born, not from circumstances, but from the thoughts you never learned to interrupt. This doesn't mean you'll never have negative thoughts again. It means you'll learn how to handle them instead of letting them handle you. You'll stop reacting on autopilot and start responding with clarity. You'll recognize when you're spiraling and know how to shift your state. That's power. Not the power to control the world, but the power to control how you see the world. And when that happens, your life changes instantly because your perception becomes your reality. And when your perception shifts, your decisions shift, your confidence rises, your anxiety lowers, your relationships improve, your goals feel more possible. Not because life became easier, but because your mind became stronger. And that strength, that calm, focused, deliberate strength starts with controlling your thoughts. Your words have power far beyond what most people realize. Every sentence you speak, whether out loud or in your head, shapes how you think, how you feel, and how others perceive you. Language is not just a way to express what's going on. It actually influences what goes on. It sets the tone for your emotional state, your mindset, and your actions. Most people speak without thinking. They default to phrases they've picked up from others, words that sound harmless but carry deep consequences. What you repeatedly say becomes what you start to believe, and what you believe becomes how you behave. Think about how often you say things like, I can't do this, I'm so tired, or that's just who I am. These are not statements of fact, they are verbal habits that silently program your brain. Each time you say, I can't, you reinforce a story of limitation. Each time you say, I'm always stressed, you give that stress more power and permanence in your life. Your brain listens to everything you say, and it doesn't question whether it's true or not. It simply accepts it and begins to organize your emotional and behavioral responses around it. That's why it's dangerous to speak without awareness. You could be affirming a reality you don't even want just because you're used to saying it. It's not just about negative words either. It's about the way we casually diminish ourselves in conversation. How often do you downplay your success by saying, it's no big deal, or deflect praise with, I just got lucky? These words may seem humble, but over time they chip away at your sense of worth. They teach your brain that you're not someone who owns your achievements, someone who stands tall in your progress. And if you don't acknowledge your own growth, no one else will either. Your words also affect the people around you. The way you speak to your team, your family, your friends, it either builds connection or creates distance. When you choose words of encouragement, clarity, and honesty, you build trust. When you speak in blame, sarcasm, or constant negativity, you erode that trust, often without realizing it. People remember how you speak to them. They remember how your words made them feel. So it's not just about having the right intentions. It's about choosing the right expression of those intentions. Even simple phrases can make a big difference. Saying, I don't know how to do this yet is completely different from saying, I can't do this. One holds space for growth, the other closes the door. Saying, I'm learning is different from, I'm bad at this. One reinforces effort, the other labels your identity. Words create momentum, they either move you forward or keep you stuck. If you want to change your life, you have to start by changing the language you use to describe your life. There's also an emotional component to language. The words you choose influence your state of mind. If you call a challenge a disaster, you'll feel overwhelmed and paralyzed. If you call it a test or a lesson, you'll approach it with curiosity and composure. Language doesn't just describe emotions, it shapes them. When you learn to label your emotions more accurately, you gain more control over them. For example, saying, I'm disappointed instead of I'm furious creates space for reflection instead of reaction. Precision in language leads to precision in thought, and precise thinking leads to better decisions. Many people live with the illusion that they're stuck, that life is happening to them, but often it's their own language that's keeping them stuck. They speak in limitations, and so they live in limitations. They speak in fear, and so fear becomes the dominant filter through which they see the world. But the moment they become conscious of their words, everything begins to shift. The moment they start replacing I have to with I get to, or I'm stuck with I'm figuring it out, their entire emotional experience transforms. This isn't about being blindly positive or faking joy. It's about being intentional with your language so that it serves your goals instead of sabotaging them. Every time you speak, you're either reinforcing your current reality or creating a new one. You can choose to describe your life in a way that builds you up or breaks you down. That choice, repeated every day, creates the tone and trajectory of your entire journey. And the best part is, you're already in control of it. Your habits are the silent architects of your life. They design your future long before you even realize it. Most people think their big decisions are what define their path, but in reality, it's the small actions they repeat day after day that carve the direction of their lives. Habits work quietly, often in the background, but they're constantly casting votes for the kind of person you become. They don't ask for attention or recognition, they just do their job. And the results they produce over time are either incredibly empowering or incredibly destructive, depending on what those habits are. Every morning you wake up, you're given an opportunity to start again. But what do you default to? For many, it's checking the phone, scrolling aimlessly, rushing through the morning, and barely acknowledging the start of a new day. That's not a neutral routine, that's a habit, and it's setting a tone. Now multiply that by weeks, months, or years, and you start to see why certain people feel stuck. They're not failing because of one big decision. They're falling behind because of a daily system that doesn't serve them. It's easy to underestimate habits because they're small. Drinking 1 glass of water today doesn't change your life. Reading 10 pages of a book today doesn't make you an expert. Going for 1 walk won't make you healthy. But habits are never about what happens in the moment. They're about the identity they reinforce. Every time you follow through, no matter how small the action, you're proving something to yourself. You're saying, this is who I am now. And over time, those repeated votes create momentum. That momentum leads to confidence, and that confidence leads to progress. On the other hand, negative habits also work by repetition. Procrastinating once won't derail your life, but doing it every day trains your brain to seek comfort over commitment. Speaking negatively to yourself once might feel like nothing, but doing it every day begins to define how you see yourself. The danger of bad habits is that they feel insignificant in the moment. That's how they grow, through your inattention and rationalization. You tell yourself it's just this once, but habits don't care about your excuses. They just do their job, whether you're aware of them or not. People often say they want change, but they wait for motivation to kick in. The truth is, motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes like the weather. What you need is a system. A set of intentional habits that carry you forward even on the days you don't feel like it. You don't brush your teeth every day because you're inspired. You do it because it's part of who you are. That's the power of habit. It removes the need for constant willpower by turning important actions into automatic routines. But to build better habits, you have to start with clarity. What kind of person do you want to become? What does that version of you do every day? Do they wake up early? Do they stay organized? Do they follow through on promises? When you get clear on that identity, your habits become obvious. Then the task is no longer about forcing change. It's about aligning your actions with the person you already want to be. And the key to sustaining those habits is simplicity. Don't try to overhaul your entire life overnight. That's a recipe for burnout. Start with small wins. Make your habits so easy that you can't fail. 1 minute of gratitude, 10 minutes of exercise, a single line in a journal. The goal is not perfection. The goal is consistency, because consistency beats intensity every time. One intense workout won't get you fit. One deep conversation won't fix a relationship. One productive day won't build a career. It's what you do over and over again that defines your results. People often say life is hard, and it can be. But much of that difficulty comes from living without structure, from reacting instead of creating, from hoping things improve without putting systems in place to ensure they do. When your habits are aligned with your goals, life feels lighter, not because it's easier, but because you've built a foundation that supports you. You don't have to constantly restart. You don't feel scattered or overwhelmed. You have a rhythm, and that rhythm gives you power. There's no secret formula to transformation. It's not luck or timing or even talent. It's habits, repeated actions, daily choices, small steps done consistently with intention. That's how real change happens, not all at once, but every single day. Your circle has a profound influence on who you become. The people you surround yourself with act as mirrors, amplifiers, and sometimes barriers. They reflect back to your own beliefs, behaviors, and standards. You may think you're in control of your own decisions, and you are, but you're also being shaped by the environment you're in every single day. The attitudes, habits, energy, and mindset of the people closest to you either push you forward or pull you back. If you want to transform your life, you cannot overlook the impact of your relationships. It's often said that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, but it's more than just a clever quote. It's rooted in behavioral psychology. Human beings are wired for connection, and we naturally adapt to the social norms of our group. If your circle treats laziness as normal, you'll eventually lower your own standards to fit in. If your circle constantly complains, blames others, or settles for less, you'll likely adopt those patterns. Even if you start with high ambition, it doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle, gradual, one sarcastic remark here, one lowered expectation there. And before you know it, you're living beneath your potential, not because you lack drive, but because your environment rewards mediocrity more than growth. On the other hand, when you're surrounded by people who challenge themselves, who aim higher, who speak with purpose and move with discipline, you feel that energy, you're inspired, sometimes even pressured to grow, not out of competition, but out of alignment. When the people around you are constantly reaching, learning, improving, you don't want to be the one dragging your feet. That's the silent motivation a strong circle provides. It holds you accountable not through words, but through example. It shows you what's possible when excellence becomes the standard, not the exception. It's important to realize that your circle doesn't just influence your actions, it shapes your beliefs. If the people closest to you don't believe in your vision, it becomes harder to believe in it yourself. Doubt is contagious, but so is belief. When you share your ideas with people who nod, who challenge you with thoughtful questions, who encourage you without sugarcoating, your confidence grows. You start to believe that maybe your dreams aren't too big, maybe they're exactly the right size. But when you're surrounded by people who mock ambition or fear change, your mind starts to shrink. You tell yourself to be realistic, but what you're really doing is adjusting to their level of comfort. This doesn't mean you cut people off at the first sign of negativity. Life is not that black and white, but it does mean you have to be intentional. You have to ask yourself who energizes me, who drains me, who speaks life into my goals, and who constantly reminds me of limits. Who wants to grow with me and who wants me to stay the same? These questions aren't about judgment, they're about alignment. Because every relationship is either adding to your momentum or slowing it down. There's no neutral. Every conversation, every interaction is planting a seed. Some seeds grow into courage, others into fear. Sometimes the hardest part of transformation is accepting that not everyone can come with you. As you grow, some relationships will stretch, some will strengthen, and some will fall away. That's natural and painful, but necessary. You can love people from a distance. You can care for them without making them part of your inner circle. Not everyone deserves front row access to your life, especially if they're not clapping when you rise. And building a strong circle doesn't happen by accident. You have to seek out people who challenge you, who see more in you than you see in yourself. You have to be the kind of person who attracts growth-oriented people, not by pretending to be perfect, but by being real, committed, and open to learning. Strong circles are built through mutual respect, shared values, and a commitment to growth, not comfort. In the end, your circle becomes a reflection of what you tolerate, what you celebrate, and what you believe is possible. If your environment is filled with people who remind you of your past, you'll struggle to move toward your future. But if your circle reflects your highest self, your vision becomes not just something you dream about, it becomes something you live. The difference between staying stuck and stepping into a new level often isn't found in books, courses, or strategies. It's found in the people you choose to do life with. Transformation doesn't begin with external change. It begins the moment you take full responsibility for what you can control. Too many people wait. They wait for the right time, the right opportunity, the right mood. They wait for motivation to hit, for someone to believe in them, or for life to somehow become easier before they take action. But the truth is, nothing changes until you decide to stop waiting and start owning your part. And the moment you make that shift internally, mentally, emotionally, is the moment your life begins to move in a different direction. There's a kind of quiet power that comes with taking responsibility, not in a burdensome way, but in a liberating way. It's the recognition that you don't have to control everything in order to change something. You might not be able to change your past, your circumstances, or the actions of other people, but you always have control over your response, your attitude, your focus, and your choices. That's more than enough. The moment you stop blaming, deflecting, or waiting, you open up space for progress. Responsibility isn't about fault. It's about ownership. It's not saying everything is your fault, but it is saying, if I want to change this, I have a role to play. Many people misunderstand what transformation really looks like. They imagine a dramatic shift, a single breakthrough moment that changes everything. But real transformation often starts in silence. It starts with a decision made when no one's watching. A moment when you tell yourself the truth. A moment when you stop making excuses, stop pointing fingers, and start doing the work. That's when things begin to move. That's when new habits get formed, new boundaries get set, and new standards get lived. There's a lot of power in the phrase, "I'm done waiting." It flips the script. It tells your brain, your body, your emotions that you are no longer outsourcing your power. You're not waiting for someone to rescue you, validate you, or open a door for you. You're building your own momentum. And the moment you do that, you begin to see results, not because the world changed, but because your posture toward it changed. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop drifting and start driving. When you live in a reactive mindset, life feels overwhelming. Every challenge feels personal. Every delay feels unfair. You feel like a passenger in your own story. But when you shift into a proactive mindset, when you say, this is where I am, but not where I have to stay, everything sharpens. You begin to see opportunities where you once saw limitations. You begin to move with intention. That's when your energy changes. That's when people around you notice something different. Not because you became louder or more impressive, but because you started to lead yourself. Leadership, after all, doesn't start with leading others. It starts with mastering your own choices. It's about being disciplined with your time, honest with your words, and aligned with your values. You don't need a title to do that. You just need the willingness to say, I am responsible for how I show up, no matter what's going on around me. That kind of internal leadership is what separates people who talk about growth from people who actually grow. The reason most people never experience real change isn't because they lack tools or knowledge. It's because they refuse to let go of blame. They hold on to the idea that their life would be better if only someone else had behaved differently. But growth can't happen while your energy is focused outward. It begins when you turn inward, when you ask, what can I do about this? What am I tolerating that I need to stop? What am I avoiding that I need to face? Those are hard questions, but they're the kind that open doors. And here's what's remarkable. The very act of taking responsibility is transformative. You don't even need to have all the answers right away. Just deciding to stop waiting, to stop blaming, and to start acting changes your posture, your presence, and your power. You begin to carry yourself differently. You start attracting new energy. You walk into situations not with the weight of your excuses, but with the clarity of your intention. And that clarity becomes contagious. Others begin to treat you differently because they can feel that you've changed the way you see yourself. Transformation is not magic. It's not a secret formula. It's a mindset, a daily commitment to do the work you can do with what you have from where you are. It starts the moment you stop hoping for change and start becoming the change. That one shift, owning what's in your control, is the spark that lights the fire. When you look at the trajectory of a person's life, it's rarely shaped by luck or chance. It's shaped by the daily decisions they make and the internal standards they hold. If you truly want to transform your life, you don't need to wait for some distant breakthrough. You already have access to the tools that matter most to your thoughts, your words, your habits, your circle, and your ability to take responsibility for what you can control. These are not abstract ideas, they are practical levers of change. When you take control of your thoughts, you begin to shape your mindset. When you speak with intention, you direct your energy. When you build better habits, you shift your identity. When you protect your circle, you protect your growth. And when you stop waiting and start leading yourself, everything changes, not eventually, but instantly. Because transformation doesn't begin outside of you. It begins the moment you decide that you are ready to show up differently, consistently, and intentionally, starting now.